Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
My timer.
Hang on. I need a.
It's so. Is everyone ready? My time starts at we oppose definition as NC 2016 writes, human poverty exists when people live under low standards and lack access to basic human needs such as clean water, shelter, and food. However, which side reduce the most human poverty should win the debate. Access to water is the most basic requirement in order to achieve human poverty by providing people with the basic need of water and also reducing the rate of disease caused by water sanitation. Our sole contention is water infrastructure. On solving human poverty, subpoint water scarcity. People will not fulfill their basic need of water. As part of AT reports that 41% of China's population suffers from acute water scarcity. While Xiaomi 19 reports by 2020 there are still about 60 million people without constant access to water. In general, May 20 writes that a total of 28.8% and 32.0% of China's areas suffer quantity and quality-based water scarcity. Zhang reports that China has been facing increasingly severe water scarcity, especially in the northern part of China. China's water scarcity is characterized by insufficient local water resources. Three factors that contribute to China's water scarcity is one, uneven spatial distribution of water resources, two, a large and growing population, and three, poor water resource management. While it is nearly impossible to address the first two factors, improving water resource management represents a cost-effective option that can alleviate China's vulnerability to the issue. Infrastructure solves the root causes. It solves water leakage, provides better systems. Economy 11 writes that about 20% of water's consumption is lost through leaking pipes, which means water that should be distributed to the people were less than they should be. Furthermore, as Koch 15 reports, the Changwon water distribution network, for example, has a leakage rate of approximately 30%. In order to stabilize the water supply, China needs to conduct leak detection, repair, and localization on earthbound drinking water pipes with more water resources, alleviating more people out of human poverty as it provides them with the basic need of water. However, looking at China's plan, water infrastructure is heavily underfunded. Even though there are plans for water treatment, the 2020 plan for the water sector doesn't mention fixing leakage problems at all. Furthermore, Food and Water reports that existing and current investment in water and wastewater treatment infrastructure cannot keep up pace with urbanization. Local governments in rural areas often lack the financial means as well as the technical and managerial capacity for administrating and delivering water and sanitation services. Thus, in order to attain basic water resources for those people, it makes it urgent and crucial to fund in water infrastructure. Step 1. Water sanitation. Underground water pollution is very alarming, as about 400 out of 600 cities in the country use groundwater as their source of drinking water, reported by civil engineer, are polluted. At least 1/3 of China's lakes and rivers are unfit for human use due to pollution, and 73% of watersheds that supply water to China's 30 fast-growing cities face medium to high pollution levels. Impact. The lack of water sanitation is a majority area that causes diseases, according to Joe 20, which is one of the main reasons of existence of poverty, namely human poverty. The health status of rural poor in China is not optimistic, with 51.63% attributing their poverty to the illness of household members. While Dubinsky 19 states that the three major diseases in China, hepatitis A virus, bacterial diarrhea, and typhoid fever, are all mainly caused by the consumption of contaminated water. Resolving the problems of contaminated water could solve human poverty. Improving water sanitation solves this issue, as Culture 12 proves that in study, the incidence of diarrhea was reduced by 75.7%, and water sanitation is only partially improved. Solvency for the whole system being underfunded in the status quo. 1. Underfunded natural solution infrastructure. World Economic Forum reports that investment in natural solutions could cause improvement in water quality by 10% in China's 30 fastest growing cities, but that will cost 300 million each year, so the budget is not enough. And 2, similarly, Reform also reports that although contributions of the investment improved surface water quality, results today show that the quality still presents a great issue for achieving stable water supply in China. As Food and Water estimates, there's still up to 80% of unpurified wastewater that comes in contact with the so-called clean water. For all these reasons, we firmly oppose. Thank you.
Okay, is everybody ready? All right, my time starts now. We resolutely affirm. Let's start some definitions. The Civil Affairs Bureau in 2000 defines a social welfare as anything that provides services for the disenfranchised, including the elderly. Don't let opponents arbitrarily restrict debate to just fiscal help. Next, some observations. A study by Canvas in 2009 reveals 3 important points. 1. 99% of China's poor are in rural regions. Even if migrant workers are excluded from the rural population, 90% of China's 90% of poverty in China is still rural. 2. The poor are dispersed throughout China's villages, not concentrated in specific poor villages or specific poor areas, thus rendering large-scale infrastructure ineffective. And 3, 90% of China's poor live in households with at least 2 members who are able to work. In other words, getting to work or having a job is not their problem. Based on this decentralized debate on alleviating poverty of the rural population. Since the resolution uses the word effective, not efficient, the framework prefers to measure the gross amount of people lifted out of poverty on each side. Condition number 1 is aging population. Subpoint A is increasing old. Campbell 2019 writes that by 2015, 330 million Chinese will be over the age of 65. This is inherently problematic since the older China lack any source of income. Most are naturally below the poverty line. This is because, according to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, all males aged 60 years or older and all female workers 50 years or older have to retire and legally cannot work. They're forced to retire. Indeed, Keck from 2013 found a quarter of people over the age of 60 in China live below the poverty line, which means in the status quo trend, 82.5 million of the Chinese population will go into poverty. Using this indicator, the elderly population goes to 28.5%. Increasing spending has the solvency. Yang 2019 affirms that state assets is the best funding source. The total value of current assets is somewhere between 60 to 70 trillion RMB. 10% of that is enough to cover any pension shortfall. Extend this to 2050, we can help lift 82 million people out of poverty. Subpoint B is the current deficit in the pension system. What makes the problem even worse is that China's pension system are severely underfunded. Rothschild 2019 writes that without generous central government subsidies, China's pension funds would be deep into the red, with deficits projected to rise to 534 billion RMB by 2022. In 2018, He Longzheng, a province in China's Rust Belt, was forced to delay pension payments because even with state subsidies, they could not meet last year's pension liabilities, meaning that they simply don't have enough money to pay out these pensions. Indeed, as 2019 South China Morning Post writes, the country's state of pension system is under threat. When Chinese Academy of Social Scientists, the number of citizens exceeding normal retirement age reached 249 million by the end of 2018. China's main state pension fund will run out of money by 2035. Increasing spending on pensions will be able to lift 82 extra million old people out of poverty by 2050 and solve the current deficit crisis, which endangers the 241 million old right now, as well as the gross amount of 330 million old people in 2050, giving solvency to all the old people or who are poor or will ever be poor. Subpoint C, Xiaodao. The Xiaodao program is a recent plan imposed by the central government to try to alleviate poverty by requiring mandatory payments to the old from the children because they haven't actually spent the money on pensions. Agricultural Information and Shandong writes, in Village Wisdom Civil Covenants, part of China's Xiaodao program, it's clearly stipulated that each year, each child should pay their parents not less than 600 RMB in cash. This is the alternative that China government has supported outside of the pension system. This is problematic because 3 things concluded by the National Bureau of Statistics. 1, 560 million people live in rural areas. 2, on average, 20% of people in rural areas make only 3,600 RMB per year. And 3, in 2019, the poverty criteria is 3,200 2019 RMBs. Xiaodao therefore will impoverish 112 million people by forcing these children to pay for their parents. Increasing spending on welfare will alleviate this pressure on the young by giving them an alternative through the pension system. Connection number 2 is healthcare. In 2016, Wang found that of the 30 million people who live in poverty in China, 42% were due to disease. Expanding new rural medical insurance could solve this. Yang 2019 writes that more than 50% of farmers believe the new rural cooperative medical insurance has significantly reduced their financial burden. The alleviation rate of new rural cooperative medical insurance was deployed above 30%, indicating that new rural cooperative medical insurance has a significant effect on preventing farmers from falling into poverty due to illness. For all these reasons, Judge, so proud to affirm. Thank you. Are you ready for cross?
Before crossfire, I want to ask for the conventional one evidence about 82.5 million impoverished, one quarter of elderly are impoverished. When is that evidence from?
Do you want to do this in crossfire or before crossfire?
Yeah, can you just send the card? Thank you.
Would you like to start
Sure.
their evidence checking time?
You didn't send it yet.
Yeah, sorry, I meant like our evidence finding time.
Okay, so you wanted the 28.5%?
Yeah, the one you got 82.5 million or something from.
Okay, sure. So this is one of them.
Hi, are we lagging?
I think he's the one that's lagging. Sorry, it's going to be a moment.
Is it us or is somebody else laughing?
It's Alex.
Oh, okay.
He's had this problem since the beginning of today. Sorry, terribly sorry.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, I believe it's your first question for Crossbar.
Yes.
Is anyone not ready? I did that no. So our time starts now. What's the coverage rate of the shout out program? Like how
The
much
shout
people
out
is
pro
included in the program? How much people is included in the program?
This is something that if you want to read if you want us to read the evidence, agricultural information as Shangdong writes that this is village rules and civil covenant. So this would be pretty much all the villages, but you can ask for the evidence later on.
Okay, like how are they forced into paying for that? Like how are the children forced into paying for the shout out program? Like is there a
So-
consequence for not paying?
This is essentially what so basically you're saying that there's no consequence for not paying.
No,
Is
we're
that what
just
you're
asking what's the consequence. We're
So
asking
there's no
what's the
consequence for any laws. Is that right? Is that
No,
not? Is there?
No, we're just asking what's the consequence if you're not.
So you
paying
want
for
these
it?
children? You want these children in order to avoid this. You want them to break the law. Is that what you're saying? You're
No,
advocating for
you're not
breaking the law.
answering my point. I'm asking you how are they doing it?
Why should you care about the punishment? Are you advocating for them to break the law? Because
No,
only
no,
if,
no.
if
How
you're
is that enforced?
if you don't want to
How
break
is
the
the
law,
law
why
enforced?
should you care about the punishment?
how is
This
the
is
law
what the law is
enforced?
asking.
Wait, it's and how is it
This is in the
enforced?
civil. This is in the civil rules and village covenant. So but let's move on to my question, if that's
Okay.
okay. So are you advocating for specifically what type of water infrastructure are you specifically advocating for, and how large of a scale is this? Is this going to be large scale or relatively small decentralized scale?
So we're advocating on the detection, leakage, and localization,
Okay, so because you do realize that most poverty in China
and
is
also
spread out.
natural solution. Finish.
I'm asking
What?
you in terms of whether this is going to be large scale infrastructure projects like China's already done, or if it's going to be relatively
No, it's not.
small scale. I mean,
It's
okay,
only
sure.
like yeah.
Sure, go ahead. Your question now.
Okay. My question, like, yeah, and then like my question is, why do you have to solve this like right now if the problem of pension is in the future? Because you're
The problem is
preventing
the
poverty,
problem
right?
is
You're not
still right
alleviating
now.
poverty.
The problem is right now. There are old people right now, and that our opponents are essentially telling us we should delay this to the future. First of all, the time frame never said is
No,
specifically
but
right
you're
in
trying
this
to
instant. But
preventing
second of all, we shouldn't be just delaying things in the future. We shouldn't be procrastinating on the
No,
government
you're
budget. And
preventing
thirdly,
poverty.
we're
You're
all
not
poor right
alleviating
now.
poverty. So can you tell us what's the
Sure,
difference
sure,
between
but
how are you
sure.
alleviating poverty by preventing poverty right
We're
now?
alleviating poverty right now because number one, there
You're
are
doing
old
it in the
people who are in
future
poverty.
because all the
There's old
evidence you
people
gave
who
us
are
is
in
on
poverty right now.
2050,
There are
2050 by
old people who are in
2025.
poverty right now, and we need to fund the pension system urgently, or else it will slip into a state of disrepair in the future. In terms of, and we will.
But you need
in a-
reform. No. Okay,
no, we
time's
need
up.
to
Sorry.
fund this because it's going to run
Time's
out
up.
of money
Thank
by
you. It's
2035.
time's up.
30 cents of prep. Thank you. Yeah.
Your 30 seconds is up.
Yeah. Wait a second. Yeah. So, judge ready? Opponents ready? My time starts now. First, let's do a framework. Right? So the opponents didn't really propose a framework except for locating the whole debate in a rural region. Let's say that their type of poverty is basically absolute poverty. Because what they're measuring, the elderly impoverished are basically an absolute poverty. Two problems with the framework. Firstly, we tell that absolute poverty is simply not generous in China. It is 2,300 yuan per year, while international poverty is also higher. However, even if they draw that international line, we tell that international line is actually drawn in the poorest country, is measured from the poorest country, and that's why you shouldn't be applying it to China. Human poverty is a far better way of alleviating, of defining poverty, because it actually cares about the life quality of the people instead of saying how many money they receive each month. It actually tells you, are they having water, are they having food, are they having houses, instead of just saying, look, they are 2,300, they have 2,300 yuan as income per year, and therefore they're out of poverty. We tell you that you buy into human poverty for today's debate. Moving on to the first contention about aging population, we tell you that firstly, their evidence about 882.5 million people are impoverished is from 2013. That is outdated because currently, if according to their own framework, people in absolute poverty are only 5.51 million people reported by China this 2020 this year. We tell you that if they're really going to debate about this, the only impact a maximum they can reach on absolute poverty is 5 million. They cannot reach for any more. But second of all, we tell you there are a few problems with the whole with this contention. Firstly, we tell you that directed at 2035, all pension funds will draw evidence. We tell that China already says that it will actually fully fund the pension, so increasing is not necessary. Reuters report that China fully guarantees future pension payments. A government official called reporters amid warnings from government researchers that funds could run out by 2035. Nai Mingjuan, head of pension and insurance office of Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security, told a news conference on Tuesday that the central government is paying close attention and is fully able to guarantee over the long term that pension funds will be paid on time and in full. So increased spending is just not necessary. Second of all, we tell that increasing too much could bankrupt China. Also, only reforms, not increased spending, will actually help the pension system. We tell you that Viola Rothschild reports that the current level of government spending on social services and security is unsustainable. According to a recent study published in the New York Times, a sociologist Wang Feng and Yong Chai, China's public spending on education, healthcare, pensions has increased from 6.3% of GDP in 2007 to 11.6% of GDP in 2016, growing faster than spending on military or other programs. That rate is projected to double to 23% by 2050, equal to the share of GDP for all current government spending. Three, we tell that 15 years of contribution is required. Not all poor people can access a pension just because they are old. We tell the commenting on the new article outline for forthcoming changes at the social security system. One worker we thought it has a lot of requirements, such as you have to it's suggested a minimum of 15 years of contributions if you want to receive the pension. We tell you that therefore it's not that everybody simply because they're poor will receive pension. They have to have a certain point of contribution to actually receive pension. Lastly, about topicality, we tell that poor is trying to prevent poverty instead of alleviating poverty. They're telling us about how 2035, 2050, and telling about all this poverty that may occur, however, it's not current. We're telling that we should alleviate the poverty in the status quo and not prevent future poverty from happening when we have more urgent issues in the status quo. Moving on to the second point about the Style argument, we tell you that it is a law, and we tell you that the law has several problems. Firstly, the law is too general. As Shanxi Jojo wrote on the Chinese social networks, it doesn't add any specific news to duties, and there's no specific punishment for children who ignore their parents. Therefore, in this case, the children are not coerced into giving their parents 500 RMB. We don't know why this is they're putting this out and saying this, like talking about this, because it's only propaganda and a regulation to encourage people to do so. It won't be carried out by force. We tell there's no reason why this is actually going to enforce people under poverty. Moving on to the last contention about healthcare insurance, we tell you that a few responses. Firstly, China already has incredibly ambitious reform program for the next 5 years. By 2020, the government is aiming to actually deepen the coverage of three main health insurance schemes and ultimately merge policy entitlements of well over 1 billion people together. Reuters report by the 2020 public health insurances have already covered over half of diseases so proud to oppose.
Okay. Wait, how much prep do you have left? Yeah, let's go for 20 seconds. Okay.
That's 20 sec.
Okay, so is everybody ready? Okay, time starts now. Let's start on the framing of this debate. You should prefer the definitions that we gave you because they're from the National Bureau of Statistics. They threw around this human poverty concept, but human poverty is really about whether they can afford to sustain basic living. The National Bureau of Statistics poverty line is the same thing, but it's more specific because it's Chinese. It accounts for inflation every year, so reject what they said about it being only 2,000 because right now it's over 3,000 because it accounts for inflation. The framework shouldn't be whoever proves more human poverty, it should be whoever proves going to alleviate most above the poverty line. Let's go to their only contention, which is on water. But before that, let's go on a major observation that they never provide solvency for anything they mention in this contention. There's an important observation because they don't tell you how they can actually solve these problems. They just say these problems are really bad and what will happen when water becomes improved, and they never go into the step of actually telling you how they're going to improve this water infrastructure. For that one reason, their entire contention is non-topical. But if you don't buy that, let's go into specific analysis on why it's a terrible idea. One, I'm telling you that infrastructure uniquely leads to corruption. Tansi 2002 tells you the process of approval in an investment project involves several phases. In some of these phases, it's possible to strictly place high-level officials to influence the process in ways to the selection of particular enterprise. For example, specifications of the designs can be tailor-made for a specific enterprise. This reduces the project cost by skimping on the quality of the work done and on the materials used, and delivers on completion an inferior product. And it has terrible consequences because it leads to pollution exclusively. The Corruption Global Report writes that because of corruption, China's water pollution problems have reached shocking levels. Estimates suggest that aquifers in 90% of Chinese cities are polluted, and more than 70% of river water flowing through urban areas are considered unsuitable for drinking or fishing, and 30% of river water throughout the country are considered unfit for use. What this means that if you actually were to increase spending on infrastructure, it will just lead to even worse results because it would lead to even more pollution and an adverse effect of what they're trying to propose. Furthermore, to address the root of the problem, instead of opening up more opportunities for corruption, what makes this crisis even worse, you should allow the status quo to solve this, because this improves naturally. Without building infrastructure, the quality of water is improved naturally. World Economic Forum tells you by protecting the forests and improving agricultural particles in targeted regions in China, the country can improve water quality without building new infrastructure. In fact, targeting conservation strategies to roughly 1.4 million hectares, sediment and nutrient pollution can be measurably reduced by at least 10%. In these small to medium-sized water attachments, the natural solutions have a potential to improve water quality for more than 1,500 million people, which completely solves this. Without building new infrastructure, the problem can be solved. Finally, what they just read in response to our health contention actually destroys their subpoint about sanitation, because this is about how sanitation and other healthcare already has great coverage in the rural areas right now, so there's no need to increase spending. Let's move to our case. Towards pensions, they tell you a couple of things. First, they tell you that China only plans to fully fund future pensions. However, that's not the only problem that's happening right now, because there's a bigger problem, which is the fact that the current pension system is completely underfunded. If you look to examples such as Heilongjiang, these people are stuck without pensions because the Chinese government isn't spending money here. They move on to tell you how the pension system isn't sustainable, but not only is this contradictory with what they just said, the pension system is sustainable because the Chinese government has the money to spend, but they're just not spending it. Let's move on to the last thing that they say, which is not everyone gets pensions, but it's about sustaining pension programs. So right now, no one gets pensions. At least we have some solvency to the problem. This is a Xiao Dao. They tell you it's not law, but it's not general. But no, it is law because it's a regulation of village rules and civil covenants. Finally, let's go to healthcare. They talk about how a large amount of the status quo in China is covered. However, a large thing to consider is that just because some are covered doesn't mean everyone is covered. Increasing spending is necessary to bring this to the keystone people who don't have it yet. For reasons above, we urge a firm pro ballot. Okay, so are you ready for cross?
So, everybody ready? Time starts. Time starts now. Firstly, on water, you told us about how without infrastructure, water improves, and you tell that happens because of forest protection, etc. Isn't that a part of nature-based solutions infrastructure, which we mentioned in our last
That's
part
not infrastructure. You're not building anything. And furthermore, look, can I just please explain? Even if you want to think that that's infrastructure under your definition, it's infrastructure under the more important definition, which is the National Bureau of Statistics. It doesn't define this as infrastructure. And even if we were to say
Wait,
this
wait,
is
wait.
infrastructure,
So
just the fact that
sorry.
status quo solves means we don't need to increase spending.
The
What this
status
is
quo
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
solve if you take
Look,
into
look.
account about
Even
60
if
million
look,
people do not have
can I
any
please
access to
expl- can I
consistent
please
clean water.
elaborate?
You've explained for about like 47 seconds, so please let me
No, but
explain. Please let me
I think there's a bit more to this. I still
No,
need
you're
to
not
tell
even
you.
answering my basic question. So
Okay, I am trying to answer your question, and even if you
do you want
don't
to move on
agree
to the
with
next question?
Sure, of course, but can I just make an important clarification? That's I
Can
think
we
it's
move
really
on,
important.
please? You're not answering my question. You're taking a lot of time. Please, can we move on?
I'm trying to answer your question, but I don't think you're letting me. So if you would
Sure.
let me make this important clarification, would be great.
Sure.
2011, the Chinese government already made a decision on accelerating reform and development of the water sector. In other words, even if status quo doesn't solve, future already solves, there's no need to increase spending.
The Chinese
Okay,
government made it
so-
upon not. Okay, sure. Just go on. We'll explain that later.
Yeah. So on pensions, you say how preventing future poverty isn't considered alleviating poverty. So if these
Yes.
people are going to become poor anyways, and we prevent them from becoming poor, what's the difference from that and us taking someone poor out of their poorness right now? Because it'll reach the same net effect of one person that would have been poor in the future not being poor.
It isn't, because firstly, it's projected, so we don't really know whether that will be true, because the evidence given is from 2013, which we don't think is valid for you to use at a point of 7 years later, where China only has an absolute poverty line for 5.51 million left. That evidence is
Look,
already out there. But second
The
of all, please let me finish.
2013 might not be a great date, but unless you can offer a piece of counter evidence as a better date,
We
I don't
offered
think
you
we
a
can
piece of
go for
counter
anything
evidence
else.
from
The counter evidence isn't
the
specific to
counter
this.
evidence is we don't need it from elderly. The overall poverty
No.
population is now 5.51
This card
million.
is about the
Judge,
elderly
take in-
specifically. I don't think your
Our-
card that you provided is
That is
specific
not,
enough,
yeah,
but I think
we're
it's
not saying
fine. You
it's
can move
elderly
on to your
specific.
question
It doesn't
now.
need to be elderly specific. It is the total amount of poor people still in China. And that's 5 million. They can't argue for 82 million thing in this case. Moving on to my question.
82 million is
When-
about the future
sorry,
people who will become old and
82
will
million
become
is
poor.
from your
So I don't think that
2013
card
average.
really has much
Okay,
relevance here.
moving
But
on
you
to
can
my
move on to your question.
Where in China's new plan does it mention natural-based solutions, and where does it mention localization and leak detection?
I think this is two
Sorry,
different things, but we will be happy to elaborate further.
Okay, prep. Thank you. Stop prep.
Okay. Is everyone ready? My summary starts now. First, we want to make a clarification. Judge, you can hold entirely their case into their definition, but only their case, because their definition of poverty is under the national bureaucratic statistics of poverty, which the rebuttal speaker and also constructive speaker repeatedly emphasized. But however, that definition is under the absolute poverty, and the statistics they hold is 5.51 million people. And then we will tell you that the maximum number of poverty the pro can only solve is 5.51 people. Please hold to that, Judge. And then secondly, when the other side we tell that human poverty is anyone lacking basic needs of human, which we count water as one of the most important points. This is our definition solved. And clash one. how to solve water issues, water scarcity and problems. They tell you that infrastructure don't solve because you can just go for the national solution plan. However, what we tell you here, that literally natural solution, which is what they're playing for, it is infrastructure. Why? Because according to ESI.org, natural solution includes both green and natural infrastructure, which is protecting the forest using infrastructure. First, it is actually supporting our point, so we turn that against that. And then secondly, they have no response to localization, leakage solvency, and also water sanitation, which we tell them which is a specific plan and crossfire of what we're trying to solve here for the CON. And then finally, we tell you a specific budget on what our plan is trying to do, of why it's underfunding right now. We need 300 billion RMB in order to fund for those projects right now. And then secondly, they tell you on healthcare. This is clash 2, healthcare. They said that, oh, there's great coverage on healthcare for rural people right now. However, we tell that there's no empirical evidence that there's huge coverage on the rural people, so it's completely irrelevant. So healthcare from them is just irrelevant on a place that you can't answer. And then finally, we tell you why our side should win debate. First, we tell you we help 60 million people in China totally. This is our big impact and magnitude. They didn't tell you any specific evidence of how many people they're helping. And even if they tell you, Judge, please hold it that they can only save 5.51 million people in maximum. So we have overall bigger magnitude. And secondly, time frame. They tell that, oh, we're going to prevent poverty for the old and the elderly before 2050, before 2035. We tell that our issue is more urgent. Those people, they need water right now. It is the basic need of human rights according to our framework and also our definition. First, we tell that our time frame is even earlier than that, and we have a bigger impact. And then secondly, we want to go for what they tell you is there's enough pension. Oh no, there's not enough pension right now, and China's not going to fund it. However, in our rebuttal speech, my partner has already repeatedly told you that China is investing more in the pension plans right now, with more than 3 billion funds funding in it. So what they tell you that China is not funding it, even if they have enough budget, is completely irrelevant. For all this reason, but we should learn. Thank you. That's such a bad flow.
I'd like to use 40 seconds of prep. Thank you.
Your camera is off.
Okay, is everybody here ready? Okay, my time starts. Now, I'll start with going over our opponent's responses and then go over the major clash points. I'll first start with explaining the definition. As the actor for the resolution is China, we should go with the Chinese National Bureau of Statistics. Just because they don't agree with that definition doesn't mean they can fiat their way into chasing the official poverty definition. The same also goes with the definition of infrastructure, meaning natural-based solutions to water issues don't count as infrastructure, but they still do the exact same jobs. Don't buy the other definitions from other sources. We should buy the actual source, the official source from the actual actor of this debate. Now, another observation, this resolution specifies an increase in spending, so they must prove that current spending is working but not enough. They have not met the standard on their sole condition, which I'll go about on later. On to the response to the pension, or to our pension condition. They claim that there's no way there'll be 82.5 million elderly old because there's only 5.5 million in poverty right now. However, they ignore that this 82.5 million elderly is actually a projection for 2015, and there'll be 330 million elderly by 2050. There'll be more elderly and less young people to pay for an ever-growing pension system. Obviously, there'll be more of these old people in poverty, and the only reason why there aren't more of these old people in poverty is because Xiaodao is managing to keep some of them afloat while impoverishing their children, but we'll go on to that later. Next, they make the claim that China has guaranteed pensions for these old people. However, Holo John, as an example, actually disproves this because they tell you that the pension system has actually been delayed, and in often cases they've been completely not paid out because the state has simply run out of its money. Pensions are supposed to be a guarantee for the elderly and for the young when they get old. However, China has not been able to fulfill the guarantee in actual practice because they simply don't have enough money. And the response to this is that China, that by funding pension system, it'll turn the entire system bankrupt and turn the entire country bankrupt. How we've shown you the money actually exists. The Chinese government has the money and state assets. The response to this was, why won't China do this if they have the money then? Well, for the exact same reason, why won't China fund the water system if it's so important according to them? This argument goes nowhere. But actually, China has been funding the water system. In 2011, the Chinese government made a decision on accelerating reform on development of the water sector, requiring the establishment of mechanisms for stable growth investment and setting the goal of increasing annual average combined with water investment in the next sector to twice the 2010 level. So the Chinese government is already increasing spending on this money. So this leaves our opponent in a logical trap here. Either they have to prove that this current spending is somehow ineffective, which means that further spending would have to be, they'd have to prove that further spending would be in any ways effective, or they'd have to say that Chinese government isn't spending right now, which simply doesn't stack up against the true facts. Now, moving to the Xiaodao argument, what we've been telling you this entire time is that instead of funding the pension system, the Chinese government is relying on the Xiaodao program. Our opponents say these children don't have to pay this, but essentially they're encouraging these children to go against the law, to become criminals, essentially, so they don't go into poverty. That clearly shouldn't be the option. You shouldn't have to become a criminal to not go into poverty. So for all these judges, we urge you to affirm pro-ballot because the solution for water already exists and it's already happening right now, whereas pensions urgently need funding. So proud to affirm. Thank you.
Right, Grand Cross.
Are you ready for cross?
Yeah. So 3 minutes starts.
3 minutes starts now. If there's already enough funding in water infrastructure right now, then why is there 60 million more people in 2020 that are still lack of water? And also, how does they keep in pace with urbanization?
Okay, number one, this would be your question to answer. If already the government is spending a huge amount of money on this, they've invested double, and they already have plans to invest in water infrastructure in the future. You'd have to tell me why water infrastructure investment would in any sense be to provide solvency for the problems you give up, because you only give me a problem, you don't give me a reason for the solution, given that China's already spent so much money.
May I have a quick follow-up?
Sure.
In our case, we told you direct source from saying that we acknowledge that there is funding for certain infrastructure. However, there's still up to 80% of unpurified wastewater coming in contact with clean water. And second of all, we also quote We Forum telling you how the contribution and investment do improve some.
So given that China's
however, results today show that the quality still represents a great issue for achieving safe water supply in China.
Okay,
but furthermore, you give me a general. Yeah, so
this is
like
not your response. This
that.
is your question. It should be your question. What is your question?
Yeah, do you acknowledge this? I'm just asking.
Well,
is it not clear? Is this piece of evidence not clear? Or was it because you're continuously saying we did not prove to you it's not enough, but we give you like 3 pieces of evidence saying that there is not enough funding?
No, not really, because you also have to prove that current spending hasn't in any sense been effective at alleviating poverty.
I did.
No, you haven't, because what you're saying. Because what you're. Please, can I finish my point? I'll let you finish your point. Okay. What you're essentially telling me is that there's a lack of this water infrastructure right now. And once again, we've proven to you through the natural means could also solve the exact same problem. But just even humoring your point for right now, you have to prove to me why increasing spending, why throwing money at a solution would actually solve the problem. But let's move on to a different point here.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's move on to a different point right now.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you claim that there's 60 billion people, right? But you also at the same time you claim that there's 5.5 million. Okay, sure. But which poverty solution are you advocating for? Which poverty definition are you advocating for? The official one, or the
60 million is not the amount of people in poverty. 60 million is the amount of people that lack access to water. By definition,
but according to you, that would be poverty under your human poverty index.
Yeah, that's what we're telling you.
So is that what you're advocating for? Are you advocating for? Can I ask a question?
No,
which poverty definition are you advocating for? I need to know which poverty definition.
Can we ask you? So your poverty definition is based on the National Bureaucratic Statistics, right?
So it's
right.
Yes.
So it's absolute poverty.
So that's also poverty because that's under the international poverty line. And we tell the statistics that related is 5.1 million people.
5.51 million.
That's
exactly.
Yeah.
So which one should we be going for in this debate? Because according to us, we should be going to the National Bureau of Statistics. That's a projection for the future. That's a projection for the future.
It's not a
And
projection.
it is a projection for the future. And to ignore the fact that poverty prevention is just as good as poverty alleviation. Preventing somebody from falling into poverty in the first place could be even better than lifting somebody out of poverty.
Please prep. Thank you.
他们那个谁，关同学一点都没有写吗？
No, he's prepping for the final because it's a strategy.
Oh, really? 就一定要 hold on to the absolute poverty 的时候，他刚刚还没有说清楚。
Your time is up.
Okay. So, everybody ready? And time starts. Now, firstly, onto the issue of framework. We tell the framework is problematic because if they claim to have a projection and they bind to the 2013 evidence about saying there's 82.5 million, they should also consider the fact that there's, according to the poverty line, there's only 5.51 million people that still stuck in poverty. We tell the whole framework is problematic, and that's why you should bind to human poverty. The question isn't what is our framework. We tell that we propose for human poverty, and we tell there's 60 million people without any consistent access to water. That is why you should reject absolute poverty, because there are only 5 million people in absolute poverty, but there's 60 million people who don't have any access to water. We find this problematic. Second of all, on the issue of health, we tell that their health insurances at best can only provide solvency, but we solve the root cause. As in our case, we tell you about how we solve the 3 major diseases in China, hepatitis A virus, typhoid fever, and also diarrheal diseases. We tell you solve all 3, contributing to healthcare the most. And furthermore, on the issue of not enough funding, we tell they continue to question us about how saying that we have enough funding already, about how triple. We tell you 2 issues. Firstly, never tell us how we're in a water infrastructure plan. Does it really mention natural-based solution infrastructure? And second of all, where does it actually mention legal detention and localization? That's the infrastructure we're driving for. They never mention any part of that. But second of all, we tell you that at best, their infrastructure will only improve water quality by little. But furthermore, we tell that we give you evidence from Food and Water about how 80% of the unpurified water still comes into contact of clean water, proving from WeForum and Food and Water that the current investment is just simply not enough. Stop ignoring our evidence and literally just engage with it, please. Moving on to the last issue about pensions. We tell that pensions are actually, we tell you a few things. Firstly, pension is already funded, as the Chinese government promised to actually fund all of it, as we said in our rebuttal. But second of all, we tell you that there's no enforcement to why the Xiao Dao will actually push all these people into paying for deterrent. It's simply that it's an encouragement, it's not an enforcement. And lastly, we tell you that And lastly, we give you evidence about how increased money in pensions doesn't really work. Reform is what will work for best. But Judge, lastly, looking at the impact, we tell that at best, according to your own absolute poverty line, they could only get 5 million. Even though they claim to you how 2013 there's a projection, we tell the evidence on 2013. It's not a projection in the future. It's a 2013 old evidence. Therefore, you vote for Khan. Yeah.
Can we get the rest of our evidence, please? Oh, sorry, the rest of our proof.
Your time is up.
Okay, let me just get my timer. All right. So is everybody ready? Time starts now. Let's start with two important framing observations. One, prefer our definition because it's from the National Bureau of Statistics, which means it's a natural solution to the water problem and it's not actually infrastructure. And if you think the Human Poverty Index for the definition of poverty is better, we're debating about what the Chinese government is actually going to do, so you should prefer this definition. But two, the resolution says increase spending, so you have to prove that the current system will work if expanded, and is currently under-expanded. Of these two burdens, they only barely fulfill the second and never give you any solvency in the entire case. The two most important voting issues in this debate are aging poor and water access. The first issue is on water access. They keep stressing again and again that there is current need for increased spending because it's a big problem, but two things. One, not only do they ignore that the status quo is already solved, but they also know that the Chinese government will already increase spending, so there is no need for further increase. But if you don't buy any of this, remember why I just studied in the framing section, they don't get solvency here even if there is a problem. But now this is where we really win this debate, because the second and most important voting issue is a pension system. They say two things. One, we can only solve 5 million. The pension system is already underfunded, and three, the pension system is problematic. But the problem is, look, 5 million people is how many poor people exist right now. You don't have a proper grasp of time because it's a projection of how many poor old people there are going to be if the pension system isn't funded. This is 87 million, which doesn't actually conflict with 5 million who are poor right now. And we're not just talking about how many people who are poor, we're talking about how many people will go to be poor. We have questions again and again, but they never actually address why preventing poverty is not the same as solving poverty right now. The pension system is currently not funded. They tell you that China has promised, but it hasn't increased spending. Finally, let's go to Xiao Dao. It's a law, it's not a suggestion, which makes the entire rebuttal, which has no cards, by the way, completely irrelevant. Let's go with the impact of this debate. Since now we agree that we should use the National Bureau of Statistics, the most impact they can access is 5 million, and they don't even tell you how much of that they can access because that's all poor. However, us, on the other hand, we can solve over 87 million through pensions, and we can solve over 100 million through alleviation through a Xiao Dao program. For the reason above, it's a firm pro ballot.
Sorry, I was just wondering if you guys, if the judges has the ballot and mini program.
Yes, I've already.
Yes, I've already with it.
I don't think I have the ballot in my mini program, so which one is the chief judge? I will just text you the results.
There's like 3 blanks in the mini program, and you just choose the second one, which is PF High School. Can you find it? I saw
I
your
don't
name
think
in the blank. Your
Yeah, I
name?
don't think so. It just
Did you
sorry,
get
it
it?
just said like no,
There are
no, it just said
three, what's the name? And then I think the first one, November
Oh,
1st.
okay, I was being stupid, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so all 5 judges have finished voting, and the result is a 5-0 ballot for the pro side. So the final winner is WINCC. And now let's just start from judges' comments. It's totally fine if you start from me. First of all, I quite didn't understand Khan's understanding of alleviating poverty. Your logic is poverty is lack basic necessities, right? And water is the most important. I agree that, but water supply and alleviating poverty, these two are not equal, because I don't think that solving the problem of water supply furthermore just solves the problem of poverty. And you also lack supporting evidence in your rebuttal to pro. Like, they mentioned a lot of their contentions laid on, like aging population, medical insurance, and disability to work. Like, and in your rebuttal, I didn't see, just like the second speaker of Khan mentioned, of pro mentioned in his final focus, you don't have a card for your rebuttal. You don't have supporting evidence. So I just wonder, you only have one contention, which is water supply, and you also didn't rebut to pro's contentions. I just wonder how you can elaborate on, like, the infrastructure is more effective than welfare. How is that? So as for the pro debaters, I think especially the second speaker, you're very logical and rebutted well. And it will be better if you elaborated more on the point of medical insurance. Good crossfire. Okay, so that's all I want to say about. Let's welcome other judges. Maybe start from Gabriela.
Sure. Okay. My reasons are actually quite similar, so I completely agree with the previous judge. Just to add on a few of other things. So firstly, I think it's quite interesting to bring up the point of like water resources. But I think it's quite risky for you to run the whole case like that. So I think it would be great if you could add a bit more like logical links to actually support you with that. So for example, how does it goes exactly with like alleviating poverty? What are the logical links here? I feel like your explanation and the links here are a bit weak for you to run this whole case. So I think it would be great if you could add on a bit more sort of like logic to actually support you with that. And I think it will be quite interesting if you could go with that. But anyway, I think it is an interesting attempt. Secondly, I really like how Khan does its weighings of impacts. And I think this is something that I feel like, yeah, I really quite like you guys about it. But the reasons why I vote for pro till the end of days, I think is quite similar. So I think for pro, I'm really impressed by how they engage with their cases and the whole framework. I'm quite persuaded by their, for example, definition framework and to contentions. I think pro has provided a quite strong, especially engagement and rebuttals with Khan's case. And that's like how I see it and why I vote for pro like till the end. But overall, I think this is a really interesting debate. So congratulations to both teams for being here. Yeah, and good luck in your future competitions.
Okay, so I think you all did a good job. Like the previous judges had said, con team, you provided only one contention and almost all your arguments were based on water infrastructure, and you mentioning 60 million people with lack of water, meaning they are in poverty, and the pro team were trying to ask if the 60 million people who have lack of access water mean they are poor. And you could not differentiate between that. If you are saying 60 million people, is it the 60 million people that are poor, or 60 million, the fact that they don't have access to water means they are poor? So you need to, it was risky of you to just provide only one contention. And the second speaker rebuttal, there was a point your opponents were referring to elderly people specific, and you mentioned another figure, which was a general figure. If you are countering your opponent's point, you should counter with exactly what they are trying to say. If they say this with this specific, you should also provide, if you're providing that evidence, it should be specific. Aside that, I think you all did well. Congratulations.
Guys, do you want to start first? Or I can just quickly wrap up. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
you can quickly
yeah.
wrap up.
Okay, both sides did a really good job. I would just want to say, like, I totally agree with the other judges has mentioned. The concept is really risky. If you really think your water contention is really powerful and strong, you guys can actually use that. But in other cases, you guys kind of want to add more points in your contention cases. I also, Conce did a really good job in Final Focus. I almost voted for you, but then I just think like the pro side provides a more effective solvency in their pension arguments in general, and they help. The second speaker did a really good job in rebutting the water infrastructure and their Final Focus. So I kind of go for the pro side as well. And also just like Ernestine has mentioned just now, you guys rejected the pro side's 5.5 million population. So just make sure you actually instead of like keep rejecting the statistics, you kind of want to prove a more effective solvency in your arguments. But yeah, overall, both sides did a really good job. Congrats.
Okay. I think virtually they touch on all areas. The only thing is that I'm just sad that maybe the team didn't get to read my ballots the other time, because I kind of encouraged you to look out for other options as your main contentions, because it's likely you are going to meet a team that will drop this, that will drop your main contention, and that's a risky part. And also, I wanted you to also explore more on the feasibility of using water and sanitation for the basis of making analysis on poverty alleviation. That's really a tough thing to do. But overall, as I said, my specific comments are still on your ballot. I pray you have access to the two, so you work on those areas. And pro team 2, you've improved throughout the line. I'm quite happy you've worked on the other weakness I've highlighted on my earlier ballot as well. But one final thing is try and have the control of the debate in terms of the environment. You should be heard. For me, I always say that's the most important thing. Try and you should be heard clearly, as much as you want to be very kind of try to minimize it and be heard. That's the underlying factor. Once you're heard, you can put out your point across. Aside that, it was a good debate. All the best.
Okay, so thanks to all the judges and debaters. We can just leave the room now, and good luck. Have a nice day.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.